Hi, I am Jeffrey Wernick, and welcome to a Thursday edition of the Fine Print. Happy to have both Bruce here and Dennis. Both of you, welcome back since you both missed Monday, and I'm really happy that you were both available to do this special Thursday edition. And so, as I almost always do, I'd like to start off with an opening statement, and then we can get into it. I'd
Right.
first like to do maybe an advertisement for this panel, the Fine Print. I think it's quite a unique panel, and why do I think it's unique? I think it's the experience that both Bruce and Dennis bring to the conversation, and I also think it's unique because our benchmark is different than any other podcast that I'm aware of. Our benchmark is we're not liberal, we're not conservative, we're not Democrat, we're not Republican, we're not progressives, we're not populists, we're not nationalists. Okay, our fidelity is to the ideas and ideals that created the United States of America to begin with. And that's our source of fidelity to documents, debates, to having where the objective function was people to solve a very limited sense of collective action problems, but while doing that, intrude on people's liberty to the least extent possible and to always mete out justice. So I think with respect to that benchmark, the standard we hold ourselves against, I don't think there's any podcast that I'm aware of, any quote public intellectuals, whatever that term means, and I'm not going to classify myself as a public intellectual. Dennis and Bruce, you qualify for it. I'm not sure what I qualify for, but I think that makes this podcast, this panel, really, really unique. So I want to thank both of you for participating, and I think it's like so. The other thing I will have is as an opening statement, continued on our opening statement, is a quote from a name probably not many people have heard of, and it's a pity because more should. And that's a quote from John Dickinson. I think many people are not aware of who are the people whose writings helped inspired a support for that led up to the Declaration of Independence, because it's not like the Declaration of Independence was the initial document where people expressed certain sentiments, that these sentiments had been expressed through the writings of people like Samuel Adams, James Otis, Richard Henry Lee, and John Dickinson, among others. And it was that buildup that led to finally this document we call the Declaration of Independence. So John Dickinson said, "Honor, justice, and humanity call upon us to hold and to transmit to our posterity that liberty which we received from our ancestors. It is not our duty to leave wealth to our children, but it is our duty to leave liberty to them." Okay, this is how serious, and the people who signed the Declaration on Independence actually demonstrated that with facts, not with words, because they signed a document where they understood they would be surrendering their wealth and surrendering their life, declaring in declaring independence from Great Britain, who was the most powerful empire in the world at that point in time. So, I think what Dickinson said are values that I think I don't want to speak. Bruce and Dennis, you can speak for yourself, but I think those are I think we share in those sentiment that the most important legacy any one of us can leave to our offspring, to the next generation, is the preservation of liberty. Um,
Yeah. Well, I would just add, you omitted the famous Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty or give me death." I don't know what others may think, but he says, he's not going to accept slavery, bowing to a monarch. And I think that's certainly true, that our posterity is entitled to inherit the same liberties and freedoms we're enjoying just on this program, that came at such enormous sacrifice. Not only those who signed the Declaration, but those who've served thereafter in wars of self-defense when we've been attacked. And that is our obligation. It's superior to any other. It's because every individual enjoys the individual dignity, march to their own driver, seek their own fulfillment, free from domestic or foreign aggression or predation. Everybody is equal in the eyes of the heaven, in the eyes of God, and the eyes of the law. And that is what is unique about the United States formation. Everything previous, it was all hierarchy. There are kings and squires and queens, and your birth determined your endpoint rather than your character and your accomplishments. And we are unique in the country that said, no, your endpoint's determined by your own values, your own hard work, your own industry. And we value everybody equally in the eyes of the law. And I think we don't understand what a revolution that was. If you made those statements in Great Britain, they'd say, wait a minute, they still got kings and queens today. It's 250 years later. That's a very, very stratified society, where it's not the individual merit that counts, it's the happenstance of birth. And that's why the United States made such enormous progress over the last years. And we need to make sure we get back to that starting point instead of going towards the kingship by another name in the White House with infinite authority to the executive.
This subject arises at a moment of a country that is being destabilized because it's journeyed away from some basic principles. And so, therefore, it's not just worthy to discuss in this podcast, but it's a discussion that needs to be held all over this country, everywhere, in schools and in public halls and councils, church groups, everywhere. And that is, where goest thou, America? And we don't really know unless we go back to the beginning and understand that the creation of the United States presaged an idea of the unity of all people. It was human unity, and we were embodying that, and in a more intricate way. In the Declaration, where we had this recitation, we mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortune, our sacred honor. You talk about putting it all on the line for the creation of an idea that became a nation that had the ability to adapt to an undreamed of future. So we're on this journey, and as we are individually, but this journey for the three of us, we arrive here in this discussion. But America's on a journey, and at times it seems like we've taken an off-ramp away from the arc of experience that was hopefully to extend beyond 250 years and far into the future, is still a rising arc of human experience and freedom and liberty. That we understand there's been a departure from some of the basic values requires us to, again, reflect on where we started. Knowing there were imperfections at that moment, knowing that our founders believed, as many people did, as they inherited from the Enlightenment, this idea of perfectibility, that we could be more than we are and better than we are. That was continence. If you go and visit Jefferson's memorial, you see he talks about, in a sense, I'll paraphrase it, like the evolution of human thinking, and that the country has to have that capacity to evolve, to become more than we are and better than we are. And if we've lost that sensibility as a nation, it falls to those of us who are where we started, of what we need to do to kind of pull America back into the center point of its experience, which has to be a nation among nations, and at the same time that apocryphal shining city on a hill that Winthrop envisioned. We can be so much more than we are today, but we have to remember where we came from. If you don't know where you've come from, it's going to be tough to know where you're going.
Yeah. To supplement what you're saying, I think with regard to perfectibility, remember Madison, if we're all angels, we wouldn't need government at all. And he understood, and the framers did, that we needed handcuffs on our own bad tendencies. That's separation of powers. And that's why it's so dangerous today. Separation of powers is meaningless. It's all in the White House. Congress writes letters from time to time, legislation, impeachment. I mean, nothing happens up there to oppose these outrageous assertions of power, whether it's by Biden or Bush or Obama or Trump, ability to kill anybody they want, terrorist surveillance program. We have no right to privacy anymore. There's no oversight anymore. We have secret government. Everything is executive privilege or state secrets. I mean, right now, for example, all the killings in the Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean, we don't really have any information where that comes from. Were there really drug traffickers? Who killed who fired who? Go up there. The public ought to know about this stuff. And Dennis, you remember in Watergate, we did know about it. There were hearings. And even the church committee held hearings, and they ignored certain pleas of President Ford to keep certain things secret, but the sky didn't fall. I remember I served on the Joint Congressional Committee on Covert Arms Sales to Iran. We heard blow-by-blow account about even cabinet discussions about arms for hostages and whether you can get money from Saudi Arabia. It was in the sunshine, and that's the cure for many of the diseases, sunshine and transparency. And we don't have that anymore. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Congress, they haven't used for 100 years the inherent power of contempt. It used to be if you disobeyed a congressional subpoena, you ended up in detention and you brought a habeas corpus suit, to try to get out of detention for flouting a congressional subpoena. Now they hand it to the executive branch and wait 5 years and maybe they'll sue and maybe they won't sue. So it's a paper tiger. And we need to get back to that understanding that our perfectibility wasn't in thinking we could be angels, that in understanding that we needed through checks and balances, through the rule of law, to check our worst instincts and ambitions. And that's totally lost today. Everyone says, well, the president said it, he can't be wrong. Whatever he says, we're at war. He says that someone's illegal, you don't have due process anymore. But process is really what was unique about the framers and what gave us such greatness for so many years until we decided to be an empire and pursue domination rather than stay a republic and pursue liberty. And that's very, very, very sad. And it's not going to be easy to take it back because this goes back at a minimum, I think, Dennis and Jeffrey, to the Korean War and Harry Truman saying, I don't need to have a declaration of war. We can go after the Chinese, and I can even suspend newspapers if I felt it, and nothing happened. I mean, if Korea wasn't a war, I don't know what is a war, which requires the declare war clause. Anyway, we have a long haul, but it's a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, as the Chinese say. And let's hope, even if we're the single step, somebody has to do it.
Well, whatever the history is, whatever the past is in the past. And there should not be any path dependence. Because we did something yesterday is not an excuse for why we continue to do it today. Okay? If we did something that was wrong that was yesterday and someone got away with it, that's not a lifetime eternal right that since one person got away with it at one point in time, or then two people, or then three people, and then four people, that basically it's been a right waived. And that's what's happened. It's treated as if Americans have waived rights, that Congress has waived rights, that the Supreme Court has waived rights, that since they have not exercised them in the past, the assumption is that they will continue to and never actually exercise those things. And so that we can operate in a post-constitutional order, with the expectations that people have waived rights. Well, natural rights, inalienable rights, are not subject to being waived. So there's no statute of limitations on our inalienable rights. And I don't think there's a waiver clause in the Constitution that says if the president does something illegal and Congress lets them get away with it, that means every future president also has the right to get away with it, and it now is legal given the fact that Congress didn't act upon it, and therefore by not acting upon it once or twice or three times, they forever to eternity have waived the right to take an action. So I always think we already have made it clear, on this on this panel that we would have impeached, a lot of previous presidents, Clinton, Obama, Trump won, Biden. So it's not as if we're uniquely targeting Trump. Just Trump's the president today. So that's what we need to address. Is the person who occupies the office today.
If I may build on that, Jeffrey, with a very concrete example that that embraces what you just said and builds upon what Bruce articulated, and that is, let's look at what's happening with Venezuela right now. Congress should have stepped in immediately with the first attacks that were declared to be in service of drug interdiction. That's an act of war when you attack another country's commerce. And no, you don't hear a word out of Congress about taking any action. So the administration goes a step further. They bomb another boat. They kill people who are stranded in wreckage. This idea of kill them all is an expression of power without any control. Now, if Congress, Bruce talked about contempt of Congress. Well, Congress is in contempt of the Constitution and the American people right now.
Yes.
By not calling up the administration for its conduct in Venezuela. And is there anybody in America who actually thinks it's about drug interdiction? Right? I mean, anyone with a fourth grade education has to understand that this is about oil. This is about stealing the largest oil reserves in the world, and so what put the lie to this whole thing about it being about drug interdiction was the pardoning of the former Honduran president, because I mean if the problem was drugs, then you don't let somebody off the hook who was not just trafficking but was a major supplier. Drugs. So, this Venezuela is an object case of everything that's gone wrong with U.S. foreign policy, everything that's gone wrong with U.S. energy policy, everything that's going wrong with U.S. approach to the Constitution, to the role of Congress, the role of the executive. It's a very dangerous moment because there's now talk of perhaps attacking the land instead of simply the seafaring commerce. So I'm, and I think for our audience, while we have this ability to get from the highest principles, we can also look at the how the Constitution is being wrecked with specific examples. And so I put on the table the example right now of Venezuela and how it is urgent that Congress step in with a resolution claiming its rights under Article 1, Section 8, that only Congress has the power to declare war and that the president has overstepped his authority already, and that this has to be up to Congress for the military to take any action.
Yeah, well, I think the principle, Dennis and Jeffrey, is much, much worse than that. It's not just Venezuela. The president has taken the position. I can declare unilaterally anybody is an enemy of the United States, even if they're unarmed, even if they're defenseless. They could be immigrants. Maybe he's calling them drug traffickers, but we don't know that. He's not coming up with any information that shows any of these people were in fact drug traffickers. He can't be convicted on the unilateral decree of the president. And then he says, once I've identified you as invading the United States, and it can be as simple as walk across the border. I can kill you. You're at war. This is a non-international conflict. I can kill you. I mean, this basically says he could kill you, everybody on this program, and everybody who's watching. He's just simply saying, you are invading the United States. You have to accept what I say is gospel, even if it's contradicted by your own eyes, because I'm the president and what I say goes true. There is no limiting principle. And that's why contemporaneous with the Venezuelan overtures, he's flirted with, well, I'll go into Nigeria and protect the Christians there. Well, you go into any place. And remember, before we assisted Israel in attacking Iran. Where's the stopping point? Wherever the president feels like it. And remember, Dennis and Jeffrey, the same idea about going in and getting the oil. That was Iraq, right? Well, he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but the war would pay for itself, $1 trillion later. I don't really think it's about the oil. I think it's about our mentality being, we're the bully. We'll just send signals to the whole world. I can do whatever I want. And maybe you're going to be next on the line. So you need to pay attention to what I'm going to do. I don't think we need the oil right now. Dennis, we are pumping more oil than we ever have in the history of the United States. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve has now become superfluous. We're going into Venezuela. It's just being a bully for the sake of being a bully, like all empires do. And we're going to have to pay for it. There's going to be blowback at some point. It's like 11. And this is, but I go back. The principle is, hey, there is no stopping point. He'll pick out whatever he feels like the day of the week. And then it goes back, and I'm not sure how they're related, but you remember the contemptible words he was uttering against all immigrants just the other day. Oh, they're terrible. They're rotten. They're gutless. Go back in their homes. We're a nation of immigrants. The Native American Indians were here before all of our ancestors got here. And we believe, as long as you believe in the Constitution and the United States, we welcome you. That means being an American. That's all that counts, is your character, your accomplishments, and you obey the law. That's how we became great as a nation. And he's dumping on our entire history as a country. And he's not embarrassed about it. I mean, he's saying that we're all terrible, horrible, undisciplined people who are ruining the United States, because we came here from abroad and weren't born like the Native American Indians. Anyway, the whole thing is so intellectually deranged, it's hard even to respond to it. It's like he's living in a different universe, like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Yeah, both of you have been in unique positions.
Yeah.
Bruce, you in a unique position is that you were the main author of one of in the Office of Legal Counsel, of writing one of the most important opinions maybe in the history of the Office of Legal Counsel, which was with respect to whether Nixon could be charged criminally.
Yeah.
And Dennis, you've been involved in trying to, affect oversight of the executive branch from a member of Congress. I'm sure, Bruce, if what you must be vomiting over the claim that this OLC has this classified opinion saying that everything the administration is doing is legal. Of course, they don't want to show, in the traditional Trumpian fashion, they don't want to show the document itself so people can analyze and critique the logic behind, that conclusion. I think that all the founders would be appalled and disgusted about the federal government having an opinion of this nature and not willing to be public about the logic or reason. That shows in and of itself their total disrespect for all the institutions, for systems of checks and balances, for any sense of transparency. That's the lack of respect they show for the American people. But also, many American people show a lack of respect for themselves by accepting this. People don't have to accept this.
But it's not just the American. Why isn't Congress demanding the stuff? Subpoena, we're going to impeach and remove you from office. At Office of Legal Counsel, we used to go over to the White House and say, you cannot do this. Nixon wanted some federal libel law things.
Now now their job is to figure out how justify that everything he's doing is legal. That's the new job of the Office of Legal Counsel.
And if you remember,
whatever we do, whoever I want to shoot, whoever I want to kill, whoever's rights of due process I want to deprive, your job is to produce a classified document to say that everything I'm doing. How absurd of this is, really. How in a system of checks and balances, how could Congress stand silent?
Yeah.
on these type of things. It doesn't matter what your ideology is. It's very simple. Trump can say Maduro's a threat. Venezuela is not really a country; it's a narco state. It's a narco state that's been taken over by cartels, and Maduro runs that cartel, and we got to get rid of them. And he can bring all his evidence to Congress and ask Congress for authorization to use the military. You have to remember the system that was designed is by the founders was the military doesn't the commander-in-chief needs the consent of Congress to deploy the military. Okay. The commander-in-chief does not choose to deploy the military. The commander-in-chief gets the consent of Congress to deploy the military. And there were so many warnings. Why? There were warnings against the standing army, and there were warnings against the fact that this was a decision that should not be made by one person. Over and over and over again, there are warnings. How is this even a controversial topic?
I agree. Yeah. They said that James Wilson at the convention said we need to put clogs in the arteries of war. And that was the separation of powers, the declaration of war power in the Congress of the United States. James Madison said it was the most important provision in the entire Constitution, that it was the crown jewel. And then I want to go back. Why is transparency important? Remember, we got the leaked memos about John Yoo and the torture memos under Bush 43. Once they were exposed to sunlight, they were torn apart, and ultimately they were reversed just out of the public opinion and the critique of people that I don't want to boast, me looking at it and say, look, the reasoning is terrible. That's why you need sunshine as a check. And that's why Congress should be holding hearings, and you need to expose that. Why do we think that Office of Legal Counsel is the gospel? Remember, it has a conflict of interest. It's working with the executive and said, hey, I'm supposed to tell the executive what he wants to do is legal. That's a conflict of interest. You can't be a judge in your own case. Office of Legal Counsel should surely not be the last word, because it confronts the obligation to try to do what it can to support the president's actions. But I go back, it's not just the American people don't have subpoena power. The American people don't have direct impeachment power. The Congress of the United States does. It could get those things tomorrow. I could guarantee you, and I think Dennis would agree, if John Dingell was around, he would tell Office of Legal Counsel, you give me that memo tomorrow, or we're abolishing you. You no longer have a job. You're out of business. That's what John Dingell would do. What happens today? Well, write a letter, please do things. They wring their hands or whatever. I mean, I'm speechless at how weak and anemic the Congress has come.
When you look at Bruce, was it John Yoo who talked about this idea of a unitary executive?
Yes.
And basically, the idea that a president can do pretty much anything. It was a concept that vitiated the idea of a balance of power, checks and balances. Now, there's something I want to add to this discussion, and that is that if you look at where the president came from, a corporate world where whatever he said goes. He's the CEO of various companies, and he had the last word, and nobody can argue with the CEO. A board might, but he controlled that. But the president of the United States is a whole different thing. Yet, with this unitary executive idea floating around, and this idea that somehow a president is infallible, that has to be challenged, because if you go in the Roman Catholic Church, which I happen to be a member of, this doctrine of infallibility relating to the Pope, that he speaks what's called ex cathedra, basically out of the chair, but more specifically on matters of faith and morals, there is a certain infallibility when the Pope speaks. That's religion. When it comes to statecraft, there is none of us who have ever held an office, and certainly no one who's ever been president of the United States, should pretend to infallibility, nor should the public surmise it. And this is where the problem begins. And when you have a Office of Legal Counsel that tries to shield every decision the president makes and cloak it in some kind of legalese, what it really does is it breaks down the compact between the governed and the governor, in the sense that it has to be built on trust. And just saying that it's my way or the highway doesn't make it so. That a president does not have the final word. Our government wasn't set up that way to begin with. But with a supine court, with a weak Congress, we are in a very dangerous position right now. But I do want to say, as a note of hope, and this is not a partisan statement because I have enough quarrels with the party, but the Democratic Party in the House will probably take back the House and may create some restraint. However, warning label, it doesn't mean that there'll be much change in some of the larger questions relating to American policy at home or abroad. That remains to be seen, and it's something that I have an ongoing concern about.
Yeah, I like to summarize very succinctly is that the position of many MAGA people is that they believe you suffer from Trump derangement syndrome if you reject the concept of the Trump infallibility axiom. So they treat Trump's infallibility as axiomatic, and if you don't accept that axiom, you're deranged. So unfortunately, I think that's the debate and why you can't have a conversation who someone says it's an axiom that Trump is infallible. So if you can't accept that he's infallible, then you're deranged. How do you have a conversation with people who basically take, those assumptions? So,
well, Jeffrey, but not everybody is MAGA. I don't think it's that.
No.
We're talking to a different audience, and maybe MAGA people could change too. So we don't want to. We don't. There's no reason to have.
I didn't say all of MAGA. I said many in MAGA.
Yeah. But I could just apologize here, but because I think Dennis has come upon a marvelous point that needs emphasis, and that it's not just Trump. If we don't take action, his successor is not given back any power. Even if his successor happens to be Marcus Aurelius rather than Caligula, and Caligula is going to get in the White House, right? So, and they're going to have limitless power. If we don't institutionally take back power from the executive branch that has been usurped by insisting that Congress make these decisions or pare back, government at all, it's going in one way, one direction. It's only a matter of how far you put in the pedal on the gas pedal, because nobody in politics surrenders power voluntarily, and that's why it's so important to keep focused on the educational component. Because even if we survive Trump, there's going to be a Trump 2.0 who's not given back the power. Obama didn't give any power back that he inherited from Bush Cheney, and Trump didn't get every power back that he inherited, and Biden didn't either. It's a one-way street. Everybody is in the executive branch is taught, well, we bolster the executive branch. And the only way you get it back is Congress says, we're impeaching and removing you. If you don't do this, they do it once, it won't happen again.
Yeah, but
and the only way Congress will do that is if the American people scream and yell and said, hey, wait a minute, we want checks and balances, separation of powers. We do not want to go back to prior to 1776 and get George III in new courts.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the point. That's the point that's hard to think, because essentially, what do people run on? The Democrats and Republicans each run on the same thing. Yeah. We need to win all the branches of government so we can get done everything we want to get done. So people they run on the premise of we can get a lot done if you eliminate the system of checks and balances. Yeah, right. So that's what each party runs on. This is the problem of partisanship. Yeah. People who are Democrats liked Biden having a lot of executive power, and they don't want Trump to have the power that they were happy Biden having. And the Republicans are happy having Trump have all the executive power he wants, but they wouldn't want Biden to have that. It's hypocritical, but people have no problem in being hypocritical, and this is the problem. Yes, if people, I should be able to run for office. I mean, just me personally, because I have no interest, but people should just run for office and just say the most important issue is to rein in, and any individual that occupies the Oval Office and the White House, claiming that they're above the law, and claiming that they can set tariffs to whatever set tariffs based upon any criteria they want against any country, that can kill anyone anywhere, that can go invade countries, that can shut down airspace of countries, and they don't have to consult anyone. And not only do they have to consult, they don't even believe the court has the right to even review any of this stuff. I mean, people should have agreement on the fact is, no matter how much I like that person, okay, I don't ever want that office to have that power, okay? We have to put principle before party. And unfortunately, the amount of people in this country that will put principle before party is a small minority. This is the problem. This is why Congress doesn't act. Congress doesn't act because the people don't want it to act. This is what the people want.
Well, there is this.
The people want Democrats to control all branches of government so they can get their way. The people who are Republicans want Republicans to get in. And the reality is, we shouldn't want the government to do very much. So we shouldn't even have much arguments about this stuff, because the reality is we should have a federal government that does so little that we don't have to spend so much time and so much money arguing about the role of government, because basically most of the government was designed to be local and very limited. That's why I started off the conversation. It said originally the framers of the Constitution thought the Constitution was there to solve a very small set of collective action problems that were not solved that was pointed out by the failure of the Articles of Confederation. It was not meant to be, a Leviathan. It was not meant to be a behemoth. It was not meant that everything we do in our lives requires us to get permission from somebody. So it was required just for a very small, limited set of collective action problems that they felt that society was not doing a good job on its own, and so needed a little stronger central government to accomplish certain things that people were not capable of on. But it was never meant to govern our lives. It was never meant to intrude on our lives. It was never meant to surveil the way we are, and it was never meant to have the scope and range of activities it has today. And everybody should say enough is enough. It's not acceptable that I want to impose my will on other people. It's not acceptable that other people want to impose their will on me. And essentially, that's what our political process is coming around. People want to have property rights over power, okay? They don't want it distributed. They don't want it decentralized. They don't want checks and balances. And most people go to the polls saying, I want to allocate, to one party property rights, and that's why there's so much money thrown at these elections, is because that's what they're fighting over.
Yeah, and I want to just point out, it's Republicans and Democrats both. We had Trump. One of his themes in 2024 was, Kamala Harris is a socialist. Well, Trump is the socialist par excellence. There's a story in the New York Times the other day, poured $10 billion, taking stakes in a dozen companies. He claims they're future national security, like helium that was a national security asset in 1925, and it was still around 100 years later. But we know that he makes these decisions based upon political affiliation. It has nothing to do with economics. That's why he would impose super tariffs on Brazil, because of economics? No, because he doesn't like what's happening to Bolsonaro, after he lost the election in Brazil. But we now have a government that purports to be, open and free market, unlike Kamala Harris socialism, but it's just socialism in a different way. These are tens of billions of dollars. You have the Department of Defense goes and invests in companies. Well, in the future, we think these are strategic minerals, as though the Department of Defense is a great outfit for frugality and knows how to do procurement, when virtually every cost weapon system is vastly ends up with cost overruns. But I want to go back to show that we are not just talking about ideas. It was reality. If you read Henry Adams, he wrote 2,000 pages of the Jefferson and Madison administrations, and the Congress at that time, they're getting rid of gunboats. They're downsizing the Navy, the Army. There was a little bit of an uptick during the quasi-war with France. The expenditures were a couple $100,000 annually, and that was the argument, exactly what you're saying, Jeffrey. Why are we doing this stuff? We do not need a standing army. We don't need a standing Navy. We have the Second Amendment. We have the militia if we're attacked, and our human capital is more important than anything else. We did have a small government. It's because we abandoned the ideas that we've all broached today. We want to dominate. We want to control the world. and then it's going to attract money because money knows where they can get protection from free competition, and it's worth their investment, to throw money into political campaigns. But I want to underscore, it wasn't just made up ideas. We lived it. The politicians voted that way at the outset. I oftentimes call the turning point in our history that has brought us to where we are was the Spanish-American War. And we decided, the heck with the Republic, we'll just become an empire, we'll replace the British, go to the Philippines. I mean, so it's supposed to be the USS Maine and Cuba. We ended up in the Philippines, we ended up in Puerto Rico, we ended up in Guam. What the heck were we doing, We ended up saying that the Declaration is only for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and started to lord it over the world. And that time we had the economic sinews that enabled us to do that. We got to reject that completely and go back to the understanding that we give equal dignity to every person in the world. They all have the same opportunity. And that's what you're talking about, Jeffrey, and natural rights. Natural rights, just because you're born and are a human being, you have these rights and opportunities. And and you choose yourself what you think is fulfilling in life. You march your own drummer, you obey the law, you work hard, and that's sufficient. And we'll pay dignity. We don't have to agree with you, but we'll protect your right to march your own drummer. And now we're like 5 light years away from that culturally and intellectually.
Thank you for that, Bruce. And what arises from this conversation is a number of things. Based on what you just said, Jeffrey, the present administration, in a sense, represents a continuum of an imperial expression of power globally. And all of the things about that which have consequences for blowback on the people of this country. Jeffrey, what you said relates to the concept that the government, the government that governs least governs best, because you can have so much government that it begins to infringe on people's individual liberties. That's what we have right now. Through various agency activities. It reminds me of a cartoon by Walt Kelly, Pogo, where they have the characters in a discussion about enemies. And it was said that we have met the enemy and he is us.
Yeah, we are they, yeah.
Yeah, so we, where we're at, is that Constitution still is a roadmap out of this morass that we're in, but Congress has to do its job. The judiciary has to do a job to protect the Constitution, not to protect the president, but to protect the Constitution, and that's where our insistence, I believe, has to be. But and I've said this before to the point of annoyance, perhaps. But I think where it's going to come down to with the American people, and there'll be a lot of discussions over the holiday season as people get together. I sense there's like a breaking down of the walls that came up in the last year between family members. They're searching for a way to reconcile, and there's going to be a lot of discussion comparing notes on the economy and how people are affected, because if you do not have economic freedom, you cannot have political freedom. If political freedom becomes chimerical, and this is where America is going to be at a crossroads on this question, I believe. And people, if they feel that their quality of life is slipping away, and with it their ability to, their mobility, their ability to reach out and make things happen in the physical world, that's going to have consequences. And so I am still optimistic that the idea of enlightened self-interest comes around to people beginning to understand that their economic needs, which are coupled with their political rights, are at risk here.
Yeah, I think what you end up with, if your economic well-being depends upon government, you're going to self-censor for sure. I mean, we're not stupid. And part of the problem is I keep underscoring that it's not that, no government, I think maybe disagree with Jeffrey, is a perfect situation. There are consequences of gridlock, but I go back to the cure is often worse than the disease. And so it's better to live with a disease that's under control than a cure that's worse than the disease. And because we all understand there is an element of unfairness in life, right? Because we don't choose our parents. We don't choose where we're born. Some have more aptitudes than others. So it's not perfect, but it's the best than all the alternatives when you have the government come in and try to make the playing field absolutely even. Because the government is not neutral. The government has its own ulterior motives at work. And so when we have the government so involved in our economic life, it naturally discourages citizen involvement and willingness to speak up. They think, I don't want to say anything against the president. I'll lose a government contract. He won't approve a merger. I mean, we see that today with some of these lawsuits that Trump brought against the media companies, CBS, ABC, or will settle 15, 20 million. The next day, a merger is approved or some kind of government authority is given that's necessary for their health and well-being. We find that Intel now is 10% owned by the government. U.S. Steel agrees if they're going to get a merger with Nippon, they got to give the government golden parachute veto shares or whatever, so the president can control the government. I mean, can control the way that the company operates. And that's why, and again, it's not because I believe that a full and an open economy is absolutely fair. I say because people begin at different starting places. But it's so superior. We know what the alternative is, right? God's plan. The alternative is the government controls everything and it runs backward because it doesn't reward entrepreneurship. Political math is not economic math. Political math is, hey, doing things in power for your friends, not for the economy as a whole. And that's what we see, whether it's Republicans or Democrats in office. And I'm always stunned a little bit by people thinking, well, Trump is favoring the red states over the blue states. Well, what do you expect? Biden would do the same thing. Trump's a little different because he doesn't even have fig leaves on it, whereas the Democrats a little bit better and trying to hide the ulterior motives. But Dennis, you and I know this government and this city runs on unwritten rules and ulterior motives. You don't have to say them, right? Because you know exactly what's going to happen. You know the expectations. And again, it's not because we think that the world is perfect without government engagement in some sorts beyond law and order.
Right.
But we know once you try to go beyond that, I call it like the Prohibition Amendment. Okay, alcoholism is bad, and we understand it has many evils, but the Prohibition Amendment made it worse, right? Not because the sponsors had any malignant motives. It's just you're trying to change human behavior in a way that's going to be worse than the actual disease that you're trying to confront. And that's what we have to get over. We're so accustomed to saying, okay, there's a problem that is not perfect. Let's get the government involved. I said, wait a minute, no. If the government involvement makes it even worse and it's a new form of something that's worse, no, you just got to accept, okay, life's unfair, as President Kennedy said. But let's try to make it as least unfair as possible and not make it worse by believing we can create man as a perfectible species.
Yeah. I don't like to easily throw out this term fair and unfair. I have a little different perspective than you and Bruce on this issue. One is I think any outcome from a market process is fair because it's done based upon two consenting adults entering into a voluntary transaction. So as long as they're consenting adults and there's no coercion involved in transaction and people are entering in on their own free will, whatever the consequences of those transactions are, they're willing to bear and that they should bear, and because they were entered into voluntarily, so it's fair. It's also fair, I'm not a Rawlsian, so I don't think that everybody has born, is basically should start at the same place. No, if I've worked hard, I've had success in my life, whatever money I've accumulated is mine, it's my property, and I have the right to allocate it. It should not be confiscated from me. That's not fair. It's not confiscated or fair. It's because I can't say because I've been successful, I don't have the right to transfer some of the benefits of my success to future generations. That's not fair. So I don't people not starting in the same place, in life and have that as the assessment of whether it's fair or unfair. No, yes, there's, if the remedy is not that people who have worked hard, who have made a success out of their lives, who have done it on their own. And you can't say, basically saying is, it's just unfair for you to take your success and basically share it with your offspring, that we, the government, other people are going to coerce by taking that money away that you worked so hard to earn, because you don't have the right to determine.
Well, I think you maybe misunderstood me, but I think we have some, Jeff, we got some little disagreement here. You think that when we did trades with the Indians who were totally ignorant out there, those were fair deals, Manhattan for a few trinkets? The basic, we understand that some people are far more, but you could say it was an arm's length deal, right? Well, the Indians decided that they would give up all these thousands of acres in a treaty that they couldn't even understand. I mean, even in free markets, we have something known as unconscionable provisions. So I think I disagree. I think that there are ways that you can exploit ignorance. And that's why, for instance, little kids, they can't make agreements. They can say, well, on my own free will, I'm doing X, Y, Z. I'll sell myself into slavery. It's a free arm's length deal. And I'm not in favor of confiscating.
So you think the government would be a good arbiter of determining whether one party, basically,
Jeffrey, that is my whole point. Jeffrey, my whole point is that sometimes I'm saying that I would characterize it unfair, but I'm saying get the government involved. It's a cure worse than the disease. I'm willing to live with the unfairness because I see all the dangers that you do. But I'm not in favor of an estate that taxes everybody out of existence. And I'm not against you providing whatever wealth you have to whatever offsprings. It doesn't even have to be your offspring. But I'm saying that even though you have a legal right to do it, I think that there is an element of unfairness. If somebody is able, when they're little, they have all the great books there. They have parents that sit with them and they read them great books, as opposed to growing up in the Sahel or in some Appalachian place out in West Virginia where they don't even have access to a newspaper. Now, that doesn't mean I want the government to get involved and do redistribution, but it doesn't prevent me from saying, yeah, that guy's kind of starts with a handicap.
Yeah, well, Bruce, I'm gonna tell you a story about a real life situation I was involved in.
Yeah,
it was this big fund, huge fund. I had this little real estate operation in another country outside the United States. I was operating very, very successfully. One of the funds wanted to come in and partner with me. So we sit down and we're negotiating now the operating agreement between, me partnering with this very, very large fund, and so they sat down to me, and the lawyer is saying to me, you have to take this, you have to take this. And why do I have to take this? Because we're huge and you're not. You want our money, and you need our money. I said, I don't, you called me up, you initiated this deal. And why do you initiate the deal? What's more valuable? Your money I could find anywhere. You called me and you called me first because I'm the best, okay? So I'm harder to find than money, okay? So I can tell you very few people would have negotiated that way, and they would have taken a deal because it said, oh, big firm, I'm so happy, I'm going to give them a better deal. And then they say it's unfair because I had no bargaining leverage. I don't agree with. If you have confidence in yourself, you got bargaining leverage.
No, Jeffrey, I would agree with you. But life is not all so simple. I would agree with your example there. But I see people, they grown up, they have nothing. They're born in Somalia. They don't even have food. They don't even have water at certain ages. And you're going to tell me that doesn't strike you as a little bit unfair to somebody who's grown up with books and learned and literate? And I repeat, I'm not saying the government needs to cure the unfairness, but for me to not acknowledge, hey, yeah, that's kind of growing up in a handicap.
They're probably in those circumstances because they have a corrupt government. And that's probably why, and they've not embraced capitalism, and that's probably why they're in those circumstances.
Yeah, but Jeffrey, they didn't choose what country to be born in, right? We don't choose our parents, and I'm saying I don't want the government to choose our parents.
Part of the reason I believe in open borders, except for people who are criminals, is precisely that. Maybe you can get rid of bad governance of the world. If everyone had an open border, then all the countries that have oppressive regimes would have nobody to oppress because everybody would get the hell out of those countries, and they'd be in the countries that had good governance regimes. Yeah. And most people that move to countries with good governance regimes have lived through bad governance regimes, and they certainly don't want to implement the same governance regime that they were escaping. Some of the biggest people lovers of liberty and freedom are the immigrants. The risks they take to get out of their countries, to get out of that governance structure, to get away the corruption, that they do to escape, and the risk they take to do that, is because they want to live with the opportunities in life. They want to enjoy capitalism, and they want to enjoy freedom, and that's why they come here. That's why they choose the countries they go to, because this is what they want to enjoy.
Yeah, but
we should make it
Jeffrey,
easy for them to come and easy for them to succeed.
Yeah, but Jeffrey, if you're talking to somebody who's in Somalia, somebody's in Nigeria, or somebody's in Niger or Burkina Faso, and you tell them, we'll come to the United States, we got open borders, they'd laugh. They know they can't do that. That opportunity in theory is a great one, but it's not their reality.
What are the better choices? Bruce, there are two choices. We either let them come to this country, or what do? We can't get money to them directly. What can we do to make their lives better? Whatever we do to help them, we're going to give their governments money. That's what we do right now. We give their governments money.
You're misunderstanding, Jeffrey. You're misunderstanding my point. My point is not that the government can improve on what I consider an unfair situation. It can't. But I'm just saying not to acknowledge that there is an element of unfairness, even though there's no way to diminish it, I think is not being intellectually honest. There is an element of unfairness, even if there's nothing we can do about it. Okay, that's when John F. Kennedy said life is unfair. There's certain things that we can't ameliorate, but it doesn't mean we can't intellectually and in our conscience say, yeah, I'm glad I'm not there because they just were born.
Let me tell you my concern about using that word, Bruce. My concern about using that word is the moment we say it's unfair, that becomes an excuse for the government to do something.
Okay, well, not for me, it's not an excuse.
Yeah, but for most people it is. Okay. So for you, when people sit back and hear something's unfair, people say, well, what should we do about it? No. Okay. And whatever they want to do about it, they don't want to personally do anything about it. They want the government to use coercive force to do something about it. Yeah. So I'm reluctant to use, on a philosophical basis. Yeah, I can take a look at certain people's circumstances and say, gee, that's nice, not nice. That's not fair. It's not reasonable. It's something that I wish didn't exist. But at the end, I also have to acknowledge my impotence, and I don't want to do things to make myself feel better about myself, even if I don't end up helping somebody else. That I feel I've thrown a few bucks a certain way, and then wash my hands and say, look, I gave these people a dime, so I've done my part. Really not caring whether it really helps their lives or not helps their lives.
No, but I think, Jeffrey, you're focused.
As a society, that's the argument people use. It's unfair, so let's have government intervention.
Well, that's not the argument I use, and Jeffrey,
I know you don't.
I think you're understating. Listen, we live by more than bread alone, and simply by recognizing and saying, yeah, you got a hard deal, it means something to them. Then saying, well, that's tough, it's social Darwinism, that's too bad. Now, I can understand it's not money in the bank account, but human beings do respond to emotional sympathy or condolences or things like that. And I think it doesn't cost us anything. So it's worth reaching out. That's all.
The response should be on a personal level, not a government level.
I agree with that. That's what I was expressing. And on a person, I agree with you exactly. But doesn't mean that because it's a personal level, we don't do it, even if it's not government. Anyway, it's
if I can enter in with my own thoughts here for a second, I'd like to just say, I come from a family where my mom and dad never owned a home. You may know the story that we lived in 21 different places by the time I was 17, including a couple cars. And if we don't choose our parents, I wanted to just say, Mom and Dad, I'd choose you all over again. And I'd choose your parents and grandparents who came from all over the world to this country with an idea that America was the light of nations, that it was that golden door, that the lamp was lifted beside, who came and worked in coal mines, worked owning apartments at some point when they gathered some capital, who worked their way up in what we knew then, and I think hopefully still have this sense of an American dream where initiative does count. And so, the models of economic models that we talk about exist for some people, but not for all. I still think that this is a country where initiative, even under difficult circumstances, where the humblest person can still make it to the top. And it's that dream and that belief that that motivates a lot of us still. And I do understand the bridge between Jeffrey's sensibilities about, look, government should stay the hell out of my life. I got that, for the most part. But I also understand what Bruce said, about sometimes people can't get to self-sufficiency in every way. And that then becomes a challenge for how do you meet people's needs if they are not able in an economy to be able to function to take care of themselves. So, I will tell you, I mean, I sat back and listened to this discussion, absolutely fascinating. And thank you both for engaging the way that you have. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think more people would be willing to be philanthropic in a constructive way if they didn't think writing a check to government then made the fact that I've now delegated this responsibility, my own humanity, to an inhumane institution. So the only way we preserve our humanity is what we do as individuals, not think that we can renounce our own humanity by saying, well, the government is taking money away from us for taxes. The government is doing all these things. So that's an excuse for me not to do anything because I've given to the government and that's all I'm going to do. The government has taken all this money away from me to allocate it to other people. And so there ends my responsibility.
No, I understand that totally. And I'll tell you how much I understand it. I have served at a local level as a city councilman and a mayor, at a state level as state senator, at a federal level as a U.S. representative. And I can state with absolute certainty that tax dollars are wasted in a way that is absolutely criminal, and that people at every level are not being well served by this system. I've seen it. I just have seen it. And I'm against taxation because I've seen how much of money is wasted, and it's not being, the custodians of that money are not aligned with the mass of people who are just trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, but I don't think it's because they're bad people. I just think that the incentives in government are so different than in the private sector. And that's why you want the incentives, like Jeffrey was saying, the private sector, you develop wealth, you can give wealth, you can be a philanthropist. Many billionaires are pledged to give away half of their estate or more. That's wonderful. And then they have an incentive to try to make certain that the beneficiaries do what they want to do. In government, they don't have that incentive. It's just, I'm there, put out the money. And their incentive is what? To stay in power. So they want to favor the people who they think will be politically rewarding, not rewarding in the larger sense to humanity. And that's why you get all the boondoggles and the waste at a staggering level.
Hello.
And I don't think, as long as we have a party system, that's not going to change. It's just the instinct of the party system. What we want to do is stay in power because we're better than the other guys. And therefore, when we look to have the money, we know who's going to get it, right? Not going to be somebody at the other party. They don't have to be expressed, but that's where the money goes.
I want to get back briefly before this ends because you both have
we've got just a few minutes here.
Yeah, I just want to get back to including the point that I think is very important that Bruce raised with respect to the words we throw out, capitalism and socialism. One is the president clearly wants to, at his discretion, control and own the means of production wherever he wants to. That's a socialist concept. That's not a capitalist concept. A capitalist concept has the government having zero role in the governance of capital, and the allocation of capital. Okay, zero role. That's a capitalist. Okay, that's a capitalist. Zero role. Okay, so we should not pretend that we're a capitalist country, that Trump is a capitalist. No, he's a socialist. His form of socialism is a little different. And then we have to take a look at the whole concept of talking about the new incoming mayor of New York, Mamdani. Okay, somehow, if I subsidize bus prices so that it's still a subsidized value, that's capitalism. But if I subsidize it even more, that's socialism. It's already a subsidized price. Okay, so transportation. Okay, Amtrak is subsidized. Subways are subsidized. Okay, most cars are subsidized. You know, in using the highway system, they don't pay for the use of all the stuff that we have. We're filled with examples of socialism. People that go to state universities, it's a subsidy. We're just talking about now the value of that subsidy. When now we have somebody who says, "Gee, we're already subsidizing it. I want to increase the subsidy." So what's the rule of socialism? I can do 50% subsidy is capitalism, but a 65% subsidy is socialism. Really, the whole conversation is stupid. We should acknowledge the government is intervening in the pricing and all this stuff. Look, how outraged were Democrats. Oh, Biden is blaming the supermarkets for controlling prices, and that's why prices are so high in food. So now we had Trump say pharmaceutical prices are so high because the pharmaceutical companies. He's accusing the meat companies of colluding. Okay, so he's coming up with the same arguments that Biden has, in the sense of saying is the free market doesn't work. All these companies are colluding, and we have to come in and we have to set prices ourselves. Okay, he's a socialist. He's a socialist as much as Biden is a socialist. Okay,
yeah.
Your point is very, very valid,
yeah.
And this conversation labeling is stupid because almost all of them are socialists. They all want government to have a significant role, whether it's through taxes, subsidies, regulatory permits, or stuff like that. That government wants direct or indirect control over the means of production. Okay,
right,
and to have a major impact on how capital is allocated.
No, because they think it will yield them because it's political power. Ultimately, they don't care about the prices. They view that as a proxy for their power to stay in power.
Okay, so Jeffrey identified that government has its thumb on the scale. My question is, for whose benefit?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Yeah. It's ulterior motives. It's for the benefit of their party 100% of the time. It's not a free market decision. They don't read Ricardo, they don't read Adam Smith, they don't read any economist. They look at who's making the political action committee donations, and that's what happens there. Then the economic theory goes out the window. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks Dennis. Thanks Jeffrey.
For this lively discussion. Jeffrey, Bruce, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.